afternoon, everyone. My name is Preeti Suri, and I would like to thank you all for joining us today on a very topical, necessary, and an extremely important subject. Before we actually kickstart the webinar, I would like to request Mr. Jack Lee, who's the president of the IPBA, to say a few words. Jack?
Okay. My dear sisters, dear distinguished guests and colleagues, I thank IPBA officers for organizing this timely seminar. Actually, this is the second webinar of New Year, taking place on the devastating impact brought by COVID-19 pandemic. I do appreciate the joint efforts and collaborations from all members in such a difficult time. The coronavirus pandemic has forced the legal profession to make huge adjustments as it deals with the global health and economic crisis brought on by COVID-19. People under COVID-19 shadow are now going to be more understanding and accommodating of people who do need to work from home. And more female lawyers get started to have better ways to balance their lives, children, and work, since more and more legal practitioners get used to the work from home model. Remote working has gone from being tolerant to being embraced. On the contrary, according to the recent survey by the US Chamber of Commerce, the number of female business owners who ranked their business overall health as somewhat or very good fell 13 points during the pandemic, from 60 in January to 47 in July 2020. By contrast, the number of female business owners reporting a good business health status only fell 5 points in the same period. That is 67% to 62%. Well, COVID-19 paved the way for better lawyer work-life balance. What it's like to work from home when your partner is a legal professionals has many unique characteristics and the different situations before legal women and business women are the phenomena reflected by the IPBA female lawyers or counsels or officers are active and vigorous during their practice. We see a lot of respectable names in our latest edition of IPBA Journal, like Preeti, like Oliver, like Karen, like Pavin, like Zara, like Randa, or Yukiko. They are either extremely helpful in IPBA's work or being on the top tier in their practicing fields. I do respect them and admire their contributions and efforts donated to IPBA. Today, we will have prominent female legal women invited by a women business community to share with us about their views on today's topic. Is COVID-19 a curse or a blessing for women in law? Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to encourage you to focus on today's topic and discussions from now on. Before closing, I would like to invite you to our Shanghai annual meeting and conference of IPBA on April 18 to April 21st this year. And I will surely bring you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you for those
Thank
kind
you
words.
very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. So, I am the current chair of the Publications Committee of the IPBA. As you may have realized, those who are attending, the genesis of today's event was really, it started off as an idea to commemorate the 100th issue of the IPBA Journal, which was in December 2020. And for the first time in the entire history of the IPBA, the theme of the journal was Women in Law. So to kick off the discussion today, I would like you to allow me to introduce a very, very talented set of panelists who got wide international exposure and representing a very diverse set of people in private practice as well as in-house doing a lot of cross-border work. I'm going to start in an order, in a sort of a geographical order, basically going from east to west. So the first panelist is Sara Marchetta, who's a partner with an Italian law firm called Chiomenti. She speaks and she's been living and working in Beijing since over 2 decades. And a large part of her practice is as a business lawyer assisting Italian and Chinese companies doing cross-border work. She is the current co-chair of the Cross-Border Investment Committee of the IPBA. She's also an active, on boards of lots of companies in China. And she's a wonderful host, as I know personally from our mid-year meeting in Milan. So welcome, Sarah.
Thank you.
Moving there on to Hong Kong, Olivia Kung, who everybody knows or ought to know, is the chair of the Women Business Lawyers Committee of the IPBA. And she is also the co-founder of a law firm called Wellington Legal, which does some pretty interesting work. Olivia is an experienced litigator. She's worked in London as well as in Hong Kong, and her practice really focuses on contentious work across a wide variety of areas. She's also been an adjunct professor of Beijing University, and she is a fellow member of Hong Kong Institute of Arbitrators. Closer home, Parveen Mahatani is a Mumbai-based current chief legal officer of Mahindra Lightspace Developers Limited, a gold medalist in law. She has had the honor of, I don't know how many accolades all of this while. She's been the woman leader in a male-dominated industry 2019. Between 2016 and 2019, the Indian Corporate Counsel Association has probably given her every possible accolade and an honor, be it including her in their books or even giving her, honoring her as one of the top 25 general counsels of in India. Asian Legal Business has also awarded her as one of Asia's top 25 in-house counsels. She's also featured in the Legal 500 UK GC Power List. So welcome, Parveen, and thank you for joining us. The fourth speaker, Karen Goh, is a barrister who's based in London, an extremely hot spot right now, Karen. She's also an attorney at law in Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago. She's a past president of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators and an acknowledged expert on resolution of disputes arising under FIDIC contracts. She is specializing in complex major construction, engineering, infrastructure, energy disputes. She has actually received outstanding words where she has been called as somebody who is outstanding in her detailed and analytical grasp of her field and fearless in her protection of the client, and the sort of advocate that most clients dream of instructing. I'm really, really glad that she is a vice chair of IPB's International Construction Committee. Welcome, Karen. Thank you for joining us. With that, I would just like to get started. The sustainability of women in the legal profession, or their inability to get to the top, is something that has been hugely debated across jurisdictions. Today, we may have come a long way, but that is not necessarily, that's never been the case before. And even today, while we have definitely taken some strides, but we are not where we ought to be. And now you add COVID-19 and the fallout of the pandemic, which seems to have set back women professionals who have apparently borne a major part of the brunt of this pandemic. There are a large number of women who have actually opted to either slow down their work or quit working altogether. I don't want to take up too much time because I want the panelists really to give us their views, but I have a couple of slides. Rhonda, can we quickly look at the deck, please? Can you just go back to the first slide, please, Rhonda? So how many of us are probably familiar with that image that you can see on the screen right now? It's something, you have a woman who's got a laptop in front of her and one kid trying to do homework at the same time and holding another small baby while she's desperately trying to do her own job. Okay, next, Rhonda, please. So, I have spent some time looking at some surveys, and in a nutshell, there are multiple surveys that find representation of women has declined a lot during the pandemic, and they have borne the major brunt. According to a Boston Consulting Group study, women are spending more than 15 hours a week on domestic work than men. And women, according to Catalyst, which is a New York-based nonprofit, they say their findings have been that women are twice as likely as men to be responsible for homeschooling, okay? In the US, there are more than 1 in 4 women who are considering downshifting their careers or leaving work completely. In India, we saw a survey by the Economic Times, which found out that 5 out of every 10 women lost their jobs since March. These are all extremely troubling facts. Rhonda, the next one, please. What is it that we have all experienced during the pandemic? Everybody is always on. There is housework, there are caregiving burdens, responsibilities. There's a feeling that one is unable to bring an entire self to work. There's also an equal amount of discomfort sharing those challenges. Add to that, to the mix, is financial anxiety and definitely a digital fatigue. All of these are, definitive recipes for burnout. And if we actually, when families get together to discuss what's happening, and a decision has to be taken because multitasking at this level is definitely going to impact. So if a decision has to be taken, who needs to reduce their time at work? Invariably, the woman is the chosen one, okay? The next slide, please, Rhonda. McKinsey Global Institute came up with a particular study, and it's the numbers. I've been through that study, and the numbers are fairly troubling. Okay, I'm not going to get into a huge amount of that right now, but I think what stood out for me was that the job loss amongst women due to COVID-19 are at 5.7% versus 3.1% for men. Women make up 39% of the global employment, but actually account only for 50%, actually account for 54% of the overall job losses. So in short, all of this actually demonstrates that the gender situation is also equally skewed. With this sort of backdrop, what I would like to do is I would like to get started. And my first question is, what were the top 3 challenges you have encountered in your professional lives as countries moved towards the lockdown? Olivia, would you like to start on this, please?
Thank you, Priti. Thanks for inviting me. And yes, I can speak for Hong Kong side. We are lucky in the sense that we haven't actually locked down the city as such, but we do have quite a lot of restrictions in terms of how many people can go out, or what time you're allowed to have dinner, or some industries have to close because the government thinks is more dangerous than others in terms of infections. So for myself, as a owner of a law firm, the first thing I find quite challenging is the court closure. The Hong Kong court has actually closed for about 2 months. And also government offices closures also affect us, because although private companies are, we can go to work if we want to, or we can work from home. But to be honest with you, lots of law firms like ourselves, we can't really function with everyone working from home. And also we also encounter the difficulty with supervising more junior lawyers if they all work from home. So the reason is we basically need the staff to come to work. We have tried flexible working hours, doesn't really work, because they said they spend more hours actually traveling than actually working, so it's a waste of time. The court closures basically cause chaos, and I think it affects a lot of criminal defense lawyers, mainly because their work is to go to court. So the court closures means they have nothing to do. And even for the civil cases, for example, we do civil litigation, the civil court, we also have impact on us as well, because filing system basically get chaotic, and then all the cases have to move to other dates, and we can't actually bill the client unless we actually go to court. So that's another difficulty we have. Secondly, it's obviously people. People in terms of staff, the tricky whether to send them home or not. Clients, we had to tell the clients basically don't turn up to our office unless it's absolutely necessary. But some clients are more conservative, and they're older, so they still find it more easier to communicate with the lawyers if they see them. So, and then networking, obviously law firms need to network with other professions to get clients. So all the networking events are canceled, and still canceled now. No parties, no gatherings, so no seeing each other. So that obviously caused impact as well. And some of the partners, for example, one of my partners, he traveled a lot to different places. So it's the first time I've seen him for so long. I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing. And thirdly, economy generally. I think in terms of lawyers, we are already the lucky ones. Not the impact wasn't as great as some industries like F&Bs or tourism's. Airlines actually closed down, Dragonair. Luxurious products, retails, all affected, and you can actually see empty shops on the streets now. The government has actually tried to contribute some money towards private business to help them to sustain. But unfortunately, the landlords refuse to lower the rent, and the rental is one of the major expenditure of everyone. So that doesn't help. And we still have to pay our staff because people still need to work. So, but the clients, for example, in other business like F&Bs, they can't pay for the fees either. So it's a vicious cycle going on. So I can foresee, even though now the impact is not as great as other industries, but it's just a matter of time when people can't actually pay the lawyers anymore. So this is something which I think is the major challenge for myself anyways. Thank you.
Thanks, Olivia. That's both troubling and, you know, it's nice to hear that the impact on lawyers is not so much as relative to other industries, but I think there is still a lot of impact on lawyers also in the circumstances that you've described, because there's no work, because courts are closed, and particularly in the criminal defense system as well. Parveen, would you like to highlight, take over and respond on the basis of your experience and what's been happening in India generally?
Sure. Thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to meet all of you today. The pandemic in the Indian context, or if I may say in this region specifically, given that India comprises of many different states and there are several issues relating to each state, it made us painfully aware of the fragility of supply chains, healthcare, and other critical systems. One of the largest issues that the government had to deal with was the migration of labor, because they were asked to go back to their respective states. A lot of the industries across different sectors were dependent on this particular labor force. So in a sense, even lawyers were affected, because a lot of the work was relating to force majeure and those provisions then, because there was a slowdown in manufacturing, slowdown in construction, slowdown in every sense. There was also a huge impact because of the shutdown of infrastructure. So interstate travel, intercity travel was completely shut down, making it very difficult to even provide services. So as a lawyer, if you really would like to provide your services, you could not really do so. And a lot of the people were not technology up to speed. The percentage of people having access to technology, laptops, availability of information was quite low. The other major impact, because we work so closely as professionals, is with government offices. The speed at which the private offices, the private services, even the courts function was much higher than the government offices itself. And there's a lot of dependency on data with the government offices, which then also impacted the way we function. So when all of this happened and we reached probably end of February and were in early March, a lot of people in India probably did not foresee that we're going to be in an immediate shutdown scenario. And therefore, when everybody was really asked to be in lockdown, there was no access to data, documents, and that technology shift hadn't taken place. So being so sudden, there was no preparedness to work remotely. And many transactions involve physical documents when we're doing due diligences were not readily available, including filings in court, which had to be made subsequently through virtual courts, but the petitions, proceedings, evidence was not really available in scanned mode. Therefore, there's been an entire digital acceleration, which had to be first the priority to take place to prepare for that unknown, changeable, unpredictable, and improbable circumstances. A lot of smaller law firms, lawyers practicing individually, who were dependent on court libraries, did not have access to even that infrastructure to be able to advise their clients and were being put out of work. So we started an initiative called Shelves of Kindness, and Preeti was very generous to contribute to collate books, legal books, and distribute it to people who were dependent on these libraries and did not have it. The other sudden shift was the work-life balance, which completely declined because you're constantly at work. You're constantly guilty because you're in the house but not able to take care of the household chores, and they're expecting you to do so. And you constantly have a need to prove that you're working because now you're not in front of a boss to create that perception, and you have to remotely create a perception that you are adding value and you're not going to be the one in the downsizing. So like Jack Ma said, you have to see change as the default. It helps avoid the rigidity and a massive one-shot adjustment. So as corporates, there's been an organizational shift where companies and shareholders would focus on maximizing short-term returns. The entire financial year had to be relooked to focus on a multi-time scale perspective, where you're foregoing a certain amount of efficiency or performance today for the sake of a more sustained performance in the future.
Excellent, Parveen. Thank you. Really, that's a lot to digest. I would like to come back to some of the things that you said over here, but I will first, ask Sarah what her challenges were.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Preeti, for organizing this. Well, as you were saying, as a lawyer, I mostly deal with cross-border M&A. And I found myself dealing with cross-border M&A in two countries that had a totally different timing in terms of pandemic. And that obviously has not helped the situation in terms of new projects. We were able to finish the projects that were on. It was, however, very difficult to start new projects. Because it's true that you can have the support of a lot of technology, a lot of advisors, but to start a new project in M&A, people basically need to know a little bit each other. And I was lucky to be in China after a short period in Italy. And in China, things have recovered very fast. The issue is that my country has not been recovering, or better, it has been going up and down for quite a long time, almost 1 year now. So the first challenge was actually to be able to employ both myself and the team, the professionals that we have here in China, in some different projects, not really a lot of cross-border M&A, but supporting our Italian clients in China. This because basically of two reasons. The first one is that large corporations, maybe they were not really focusing so much, at least from Italy, on M&A, but they were certainly focusing in do a little bit of in-house cleaning. And therefore we have helped them with some issues about governance and compliance in their investments growth. And the second is that the impossibility basically of traveling. And it's not only a question of outbreaks, but it's really a question of organizing the travel, organizing the quarantines, finding the flights, and so on, has actually made our clients sending us to meetings, even business meetings, that they were not able to attend to in person, because after 1 year, it's actually, if you have an investment in China and you have not seen your Chinese partner or your managers, you want to have the possibility of giving some messages and sharing some time together. So we have been doing this. What I have to say, and this is probably more linked to the female lawyers that we have in Italy. Italy is still a very traditional country from this point of view. So women are the primary caregivers for kids and for all their parents. This meant that our female professionals were under constant stress about the general situation, about kids in e-learning, about making food, about not having any support, home help, which they could have actually had, and they usually had organized for their normal professional life, but it was basically impossible in a situation of lockdown. So what we have seen is very, very tired female professionals in our firm. Because the work inside Italy has not, well, it has to slow down a little bit, but it has not stopped. But suddenly there was a reorganization to be made in terms of timing, availability to work, keeping company to your kids, because it's not just only looking at that they are online following their teachers, or that they get fed, but it's also like keeping company to them. So what we have seen actually is not really female lawyers abandoning the profession or turning into something else, but being extremely tired because of all the pressures that were actually organized to be relieved by sharing the burden with other people that were not available anymore during lockdown.
Thanks, Sarah. I think those are all very, very valid, and I think points that you've mentioned that we can all relate to at so many levels. I think physical exhaustion and the impact of multitasking, which I think women experience at almost at another level, and add to that the lack of support, the probable lack of support, because if you're staying with somebody and the other person's also equally working at the same time, so just the ability of a woman to take on more. I mean, it's I think these things cannot be undermined at all. Karen, what are your thoughts? Do you agree? Did you experience something different?
I think my experience is slightly different in the sense that, like Parveen, I'm not a corporate lawyer. Like Olivia, I'm not running a whole company. And Sarah, although I work internationally, I'm not in an industry which is, it is impacted, of course it's impacted, and in a serious way, but not in the same way as mergers and acquisitions would be, because I mean, obviously people can choose when they undertake a merger or an acquisition. There's some kind of flexibility there. When you have big infrastructure and energy projects going forward, they tend to be continuing processes. It's safe perhaps in situations where, for example, if you think about the 2008 and 2009 crash, I went to Dubai in 2009 and there were just idle cranes everywhere. There was a complete stop. Here in the UK, certainly the industry in which I undertake the majority of my practice has had a hiatus, but it's moving forward. It always moves forward. And I think the thing with lawyers and litigators, disputes work, is I've always found that and I've lived through, of course, now 3 or 4 recessions, that whenever there is a recession, things that parties might settle, suddenly they don't settle anymore. They want to argue about them because there is a slowdown in work, perhaps. And so disputes work goes up. Eventually, I think things catch up and there can be a bit of a lag, but there's no shortage of disputes work for lawyers, certainly not in my area of practice. Now, this whole webinar, it's about curses and blessings for women working in law. And I think we'll all be on the same page if I say there's no blessing coming out of this pandemic which outweighs the horror of the situation. And I think that everybody is a little bit war-torn by it by now. We thought we had a few months of difficulty that we needed to endure. And we now see that we're almost a year into it. And it goes on. And the virus, the impacts of the virus are like the virus itself. They regenerate themselves and they take different directions. Excuse me. And we all have to manage those as we go through. And whether the experience is certainly different for women, but whether it's more intense for women than for men, I can't say. As a woman, I assume it is, for all the reasons that all of you have already spoken about. But we can't be sure. We don't actually have even a token man amongst us today to say, well, actually, ladies, you know, it's not so great for us either. But you asked for 3 challenges. The first challenge for me, and I think this has come out from what all of you have already said, is the uncertainty around all of this. And to begin with, certainly on a personal level, and I think many of my colleagues felt the same, there was an absence of confidence whether we would be able to manage the new situation from a work perspective. And I don't think that can be understated. It was enormous. And suddenly we were running up a learning curve at a speed, you know, that certainly at my stage in my career, I never thought I would have to embark upon. And it's like having a car accident and suddenly you wake up from a coma and you're in a completely different world. So for me, that was the first challenge, dealing with the uncertainty and dealing with it, not just for myself, but for everybody I interacted with. Secondly, and I think Olivia, definitely, you dealt with this quite in some detail, and that is the issues of continuity. Okay, we've woken up from this coma and everything is very different. So then how do we carry on? Do we go to court? Do we not go to court? Can we go to court? If we go to court, how are we going to deal with things when we get there? With arbitration hearings, conducting arbitration hearings. I mean, I've conducted arbitration hearings remotely in terms of hearing or giving evidence remotely, but on a very limited basis. Suddenly everything had to go online. Blue Jeans, Teams, WebEx, Zoom, all of these things completely foreign to us. We had to grab them all, learn about them and run with them and deal with it. Documents, e-bundles. I think the English experience, certainly not just for women, but for lawyers generally, dealing with e-filings and dealing with e-bundles. We're all able to deal with that because we actually have gone quite a long way along the road already. So suddenly it was imperative and not just optional, but at least we have some experience and we're able to deal with it. And our Supreme Court and Privy Council have been dealing with e-bundles for some time. So it's not foreign to us, for those of us who practice in civil and commercial law, to deal with e-bundles. My clerking team can put together an e-bundle very easily and very quickly. But I really feel for those people who don't have that kind of backup support, because it must have been very difficult for them. But I think generally English lawyers were reasonably well equipped to do that kind of thing. But then relationships with administration, again, I think we all speak to the same thing, how to maintain those relationships. We have a management team and an administrative team. They reacted incredibly swiftly to the pandemic impacts on chambers. Suddenly there's a huge building in London and nobody is in it. How do you manage that? I mean, that had enormous challenges for our admin. They had to deal with that. Our clerks, our finances teams, they all had to manage working from home and dealing with things. And then marketing, everything changed with marketing as well. And our marketing team had to run up a very steep learning curve and change the way in which we marketed ourselves. And IT, although as a set of chambers, we were reasonably well equipped to work from home, they had to make sure that we could all work from home, that we could all conduct these kind of conversations not just internally, but also with the wider world. The third thing I would say was the practical problems of professional life. And I think I've spoken for long enough, so I won't say any more about that, but I would certainly endorse and support all the things that all of you have already said about the practical problems for women in law dealing just with the basics of professional life. They're very real problems, and I do think they impact in a negative way on our ability of women to do our jobs, even in the law, which I've always thought was a reasonably flexible working environment for women with families and also with caregiving obligations.
Thank you, Kevin. I think there's a lot that you have said which resonates with so many of us at so many levels, and the uncertainty might have reduced, but perhaps it hasn't quite completely gone away. I think we all thought that once 2020, becomes 2021, things will change miraculously. That's not happening anytime soon. But I think you've all made some wonderful points. Infrastructural challenges has been a huge issue, whether it is speeding up yourselves, your own skills to catch up with the technology, or reinventing how you work, as well as court filings. Some countries, like you talked about, UK being a little bit more advanced. We've had innumerable set of challenges, and we continue to have them today, even though we moved to an virtual hearing model in courts in India, at least. But yes, so these challenges are very real across jurisdictions. I'm going to move on to my second question, which really focuses on, given the challenges surrounding gender equality, diversity, and inclusion, do you really, and right now it's really, the focus of the question is on the challenges emanating from issues that we have even today on gender equality, diversity, and inclusion. Do you think that the aftermath of COVID is actually going to push women out of the workforce? Or is that something that's, we're all over-imagining things? Sarah, would you like to take that up first, please?
Yes, sure. Well, if I look at our profession, I think that at least for what I can see in China and for what I know about Italy, this is probably not going to happen. I think that the firms, at least the ones that I have been in contact, have quite a clear idea about the difficulties that female lawyers have been encountering in the past year. Obviously, one thing is being aware of the difficulties, and another thing is doing something to solve those difficulties or to help female lawyers to go through this time. I think that what we have done in Italy is female staff was actually able to take advantage from a flexible working system and time that was actually allowing them to divide the day between working, meaning not every time being present all the time, but having very specific timing, like starting maybe very early in the morning, or having a longer lunch pause because they needed to prepare lunch also for other members of the family, maybe working a couple of hours late in the evening when the kids are already sleeping, and so on. Obviously, this was a little bit more complicated for female lawyers, not staff. Especially if you are in a sector like M&A, where it's really more complicated to program the exact timing when you can have a call with a client, or when you need like 3 hours of deep work because you need to produce a document. So that was a little bit more challenging. But we have tried to address this in the firm by looking at smaller teams and trying to organize the teams with more people, adding female lawyers, so that more members of the team would actually be able to better share the work and to, let's say, not cover, but substitute one to each other. And actually this has been proven an exercise that clients have appreciated, first of all. And at the end of the day, it doesn't seem that it was more expensive for clients to do so. So we have looked at transactions and original teams, and we have tried to resolve this not at a very high level inside the firm, but really looking at small teams and at people that were working together with a partner in charge that was also looking at these aspects. In generally speaking, I think that a resetting that is happening with the pandemic, with a more attention to the issues of inclusion, diversity, all the ESGs issues actually, might be a good occasion for women to try to reset a little bit also the things that were not working before. So now we are seeing more and more engagement of corporations, of firms, of government agencies, looking at the social aspects of business. And this, I think, might be a good occasion for us to contribute more, and also say that, you know, the problems that we had before the pandemic were just getting bigger and more complicated to solve during the pandemic. They are still there, and this a reset of certain ways in which business is organized might actually bring, if we are able to take this chance, more opportunities for women. This might not be true for all the sectors. It might be true for teachers, it might be true for lawyers, it might be true for managers, maybe it's less true for people working in other types of services. But I think that we have to think about this. Okay, I agree with Karen that there is no blessing in this pandemic for anybody. But we might take this occasion to rethink some things. And I think that there is the availability, the general availability of the public, of businesses, of institutions to look at something different. And the fact that women have always been involved not only in professional life and in businesses, but in all aspects of life. The raising of the kids, taking care of family, you know, the care part that is very close to what we are. I think it's going to be a very good advantage to take this occasion to try to change some things.
Thank you, Sarah. Karen, would you like to add to what Sarah has said?
Yes, I mean, the exam question, will we be pushed out? Absolutely not. We're women. We are not going to be pushed out. Will we be? Are we adversely affected? I think everything we're saying just demonstrates that, yes, we are being adversely affected, not just as women in law, but just as women generally. And the potential is there, I think, and it's probably already taking effect for a reduction in the numbers of women in the workplace and the amount of work that women in the workplace are able to do. And I don't think that's just a women in law situation. I think that's a women everywhere situation. And that's not just because we've got digital fatigue, it's because of all the other obligations that simply fall into our laps because we're women. And I hope nobody thinks that that's a sexist remark, but we do shoulder enormous family and I think also community responsibilities as women. And as women in law, our obligations are no different from other women in that respect. We just happen to be lawyers, but maybe also as women in law, we have a bigger responsibility to other women because we are in a position to influence what actually happens to other women. If we see a regression in women's rights, in gender equality issues, if we see a regression, we're in a position to do something about it. And therefore, I think we have to be particularly vigilant. Other people have spent 100 years in advancing the cause of women generally. In 1 year, I think we will have seen at the end of this, and as I say, I don't think it will end in 1 year, but even after a year, we can see that the position of women in the workplace, in law, and in every other profession has been adversely affected by this pandemic. And if we are able to do something about it, then we surely have to do something about it. If there is going to be a reduction in employment, who will be the first people to be put out of work? In more traditional societies, the man will still be thought of as the breadwinner. So the women will be the ones that will be first out the door. They will be the ones losing their jobs. Perhaps not in the UK so much. I don't think so. I feel that's a particular experience with me, but I can foreshadow in other places where I go to work that will certainly be the case. So I think for us, we do have to be very, very vigilant and very careful and try and look after our sisters in the workplace to try and maintain the advancements that women have made, not just in the law, but everywhere in the workplace. I think I'll leave it there because I'm looking at the clock and thinking other people need to speak.
Thank you, Karen. I love that enthusiasm. Parveen, would you like to comment on that, and then maybe Olivia, and then I will move on to the next question, which actually links pretty well with this. But Parveen?
Yes, thank you so much. I think women originally and traditionally continue to have to choose between managing a home and being at work. And post-COVID, whenever that happens, and while we're transitioning into living with it also, we don't really have to choose. We can manage both. I think what we forget and needs to be continually reminded is that we have an inherent ability to multitask. And it's actually time to leverage that ability. On the corporate side, where companies are, law firms are, there is a lot of acceptance. Companies are actually rechecking their productivity and performance expectations that were set before COVID and seeing whether they're really realistic. And the focus now is on productivity. In a traditional setup, at least I can say that in the Indian context, and I've seen that in many countries when we're doing transactions, where whoever really stays late in the office is seen and at least perceived to be the most productive. There's a realization now that that's really not so, and that's not a measure of performance at all. Companies are increasingly being more supportive. They're encouraging diversity because it does bring in a fresh perspective. However, of course, the infrastructure needs to support return to work. The other shift over the last couple of months, when I've been talking to various colleagues, is a migration on the area of practice as a preference. Higher degree of preference to corporates, to law firms, which are supporting work from home and having such policies. The last aspect, and we move on to Olivia, is the biases. And the biases are showing up in new ways during COVID. We started off where Preeti showed a picture of young children and a mother on a laptop. And when our colleagues see that, are we really making them feel awkward about it, or accepting that is the way of life as long as they're making their point and adding value? That is fine, and we do not need to use a virtual background to shield the reality that they face. So for me, it is an attitudinal mind shift, COVID or no COVID. Women get included or excluded due to our own attitude to them.
Love this. I love this. I love the attitude of this group. Olivia, would you like to add to this?
Yes, I completely agree with Pravin that women are very good at multitasking. Joking aside, I think in Hong Kong, I think it's more not like whether women will be out of the workforce, is more like anyone. We're at the moment, I think it's more like a survival of the fittest situation here. Lots of law firms and businesses in Hong Kong. In fact, the Hong Kong General Chamber of Commerce did a survey a few months ago. And the outcome of the survey is that the businesses are not too optimistic of the near future of the city at the moment, because in fact, it's a mixture of the pandemic, and also in fact, Hong Kong has actually suffered an extra year of all these protestings, and it actually had caused a lot of impact on businesses. It has affected a lot of business, and so as a result, the law firms and businesses generally, they are a little bit reluctant to hire people. They're on this holding mode. Let's see what happens first. Or some of them, I know that, are asking staff to reduce their salaries or go on unpaid leave. And some basically laid them off. And I know some international law firms basically closed down the Hong Kong office. So it's more like, it's who will go first? It's not like a woman only thing. And in fact, I looked at the news, the unemployment rate in Hong Kong has hit 16-year high. So we have now hit 6.4%, and economists predict it will reach up to 8% in April or May time. Although we don't have a lockdown, because the government has chosen certain industries that they cannot operate, for example, beauty salons, and as I've mentioned, the F&B business are seriously affected because at the moment, for example, we are not allowed to have dinner after 6 o'clock. So all the restaurants need to do takeaways, or they don't have much work, basically. Tourism is another one. Retail, as I mentioned before. And these are industries that basically consist mainly of female workers. So for example, you're not allowed to have a manicure. It's not allowed because it's closed. So these are things that become a problem, because a lot of these personal service, or even some of last week on the news, there is some domestic helper, they're saying from the local domestic helpers asking people whether they can give them work, because a lot of people don't want to hire people, strangers coming into their properties in case of the COVID. So they don't want people to come and clean a house. And also the union, for example, for the beauticians also went on the news to say, we are really struggling over here. So we need to work, you know. So yes, it is a problem at the moment. I think it's not only for women, but also for a lot of people, men as well. But I think women are hit more. Female workers are not as, female lawyers are not as hit as hard as other industries, because our industries the impact hasn't actually gone to us yet. And as Karen has mentioned, yes, litigation is the way to survive at the moment. And that's why most law firms have a litigation department and a corporate. So at good times, the corporate will basically run the show, and at bad times, the litigation department is the one that helps the firm to survive. But I know from generally speaking, a lot of people are changing career at the moment, even though they're at my age at least. For example, teachers, coaches, coaches that teach sports, for example, swimming coach, tennis coach, things that you can't actually do virtually. Even someone I know who is in accountancy firms, the big four partners, need to change career as well, because those are also cutting down staff. So a lot of people are now venture their second career at this stage. So yes, that's my contribution to this question.
Thank you, Olivia. I think pretty much everybody's been rather positive about this. While there is a fallout, but that fallout is because of an economic crisis and not necessarily gender-based. And this sort of, with this, I sort of segue into my next question. We said that, COVID-19, whether it is a curse or a blessing. So with all the infrastructural changes that we've all had to adapt to, would you say that the fact that one can work remotely has actually created a level playing field and opportunities for women who had left the practice of law even before COVID, and whether they can see it, whether they could be located anywhere from a geographical perspective, because remote working is much more acceptable at this point in time. So would you say that we can take that COVID has actually created an opportunity for women to come back to work as such? Parveen, would you like to start with this, please?
Sure. So it actually reminds me of what Andy Warhol had said, that in the future, everyone will be famous for 15 minutes. And that's what the reality is, where transient high performance is commonplace, and it's the sustained performance by individuals that stands apart. This actually relates to and gives a level playing field, in a sense, because it is the survival of the best performer. If you have the ability to provide a great service of great value to your client, it doesn't really matter where you're located from, because it is the product and the service which is of high quality. So the choices that we really make today, on a very serious note, to include women who left law, will have a huge impact for decades to come. And therefore, how we act today to include them is going to be the future for them. And that means whether we need to make significant investments in building a more flexible and an empathetic workplace, so that they can continue to work. Whether we set hours for meetings, we put in policies in place for responding to emails outside typical business hours, improving communication about work hours, availability between teams, even daycare support that is provided in the Indian context. There isn't any legislation with regard to daycare. In fact, there aren't really any daycare centers. And that's one of the reasons why women either opt out of work or choose not to climb the ladder, because it gets that much more demanding and they have competing responsibilities at home. So we really need to foster a culture that supports and values women to be able to bring them back to work.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you, Parveen. Karen, would you like to go next, please?
Yes, I absolutely agree with everything that Parveen has just said. And I think the real challenge for us it is to find the physical and mental space for women in law in particular to actually focus on their work and to do their work. And it is that absence of physical and mental space that will pull women out of the workplace during this pandemic by the need to work at home and to work remotely. And also, I mean, simply the availability of physical space is absolutely critical to an ability to work from home. If you have young children or if you have caregiving responsibilities for older people, if you don't have enough space in which you can take yourself away from all of that to sit down and focus on what you're doing, it becomes impossible. It's just too hard. So it's important when we talk about working remotely that we actually ensure that the people that we're working with in our teams are able to do their work. And we also need to have an understanding that people doing that work will not be able to do it necessarily from the hours of 9 till 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening. I'm sure those of us that have children, certainly my experience when I had very young children without any pandemic was very often the hours between 12 midnight and 2 or 3 in the morning were the only time when there was enough quiet in the house for me to do something which was really, really complicated and for which I needed complete peace. That's not ideal, but there are similarities here because now women, instead of having the quiet of an office, are actually forced to work in the home, and therefore having that space, finding that space is going to be a challenge, and we have to be very mindful and accommodating of that requirement. I don't think it's going to be the case that we can be anywhere on the planet and be hired in the future. There is a need for us to be accessible physically. We might be able to do that for short periods. I travel extensively for work, and for short periods, I can conduct my practice from any place in the planet, but I couldn't always be able to do that. It simply wouldn't work. There has to be a base. You know, and it's the same in the office. People in the office, receptionists or IT people, finance people, admin, at the lowest level, someone needs to be in the office to open the post. So we're not all able to work remotely, and we have to work and construct our teams in a way that facilitates the remote working of those that can, but a safe physical presence in an office for those who can't.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Karen. In the interest of time, I will jump quickly to Olivia and then to Sarah on this question.
I agree with Karen. It's basically a job nature as well. Some jobs you can't. I mean, receptionists, like messengers, you cannot ask them to work from home. For example, pilots, if they work from home, that would be really scary, actually, in fact. Now, I think as an employer, for example, my own firm, we have got staff who work from home. And even before COVID, that because they've got children, they want to work from home. And some, in fact, does not even stay in Hong Kong. They live in another country. So those ones are completely based on Zoom, WhatsApp, and emails, and it works perfectly fine. It depends on the job nature, really. But interestingly, I have just received the Law Society of Hong Kong's survey about 2 days ago. And they have actually done the survey about whether people would like to prefer flexible working hours or virtual office or home office. And the results of that survey from the respondents, 75.9% of respondents prefer flexible working hours, and 57.9% respondents prefer virtual office. So I think it's a matter of choice and circumstance. For example, in Hong Kong, lots of homes are actually quite small. So it creates a situation where For example, the parents both work from home, like in COVID situation. Children have to have home learning because the school closed. So you ended up with 4 people working from home virtually, and a typical household, say 2 rooms, give them 3, okay? It's still not enough space for them to all do Zoom. And some, I read an article that some people ended up doing Zoom in the bathroom or outside. They had to go outside in a car just to do Zoom. So it's an issue. It depends on the circumstance of that person as well, and also the job nature. But I think as an employer, we need to be flexible. I think that's the main thing.
Thank you. Thank you, Olivia. Sarah, would you like to add to this, please?
Maybe I'm too traditional or too technologically challenged. But I don't think that I would ever hire someone that I have not been talking to, or that I have not been able to work with physically. That would be my personal limit. If we talk about flexible working hours or working 1 week at home and 1 week in the office, that might be possible, but this is, at least in my case, has been possible because I have a team and I have been working with them together for more than 15 years. So we know each other and we can have all the meetings, the calls, the chats, and there is a lot of things going on, even if we don't see each other. The other issue, which is connected to what Karen was saying, I mean, besides having physically the space to work in, which at home it might not be easy for everyone, I need to have a space where I can do deep work, and that usually is not home. It has to be somewhere else. Maybe it's a park, maybe it's some other place, but it's not home. Once again, it might be a very traditional approach. And then the other thing that I think that the working online is really difficult is training for young lawyers, or putting someone new and young and less experienced into a team. It's far more complicated if you're working only online and you don't see the reactions of the people. It's more complicated to read the body language. You don't have this feel about a lot of things that you would perceive if you're in the same room, and that you can see in Zoom, but are more complicated to read or to just, subconsciously evaluate.
Sarah, I completely agree with you. I concur with what you are saying over here in totality. Personally, for me, virtual will never replace the real. It's as simple as that. I'm conscious of the time as well, but I think I would like to touch on one more question, and then maybe go to Q&A. Some of it we've already partly touched, because we are saying that flexi working and working arrangements, remote working, all of these are possibilities. And I think, Parveen, you had talked about how do you measure performance as well. So what are some of your thoughts? We've all had to hire people in the last 12 months, and what would be good onboarding practices? Some of the challenges, I think, Sarah, you touched upon right now, without having the real feel. How do you measure performance? How do you compensate? And how do you reward? Is it premature, but is that something that people are thinking about? Parveen, would you like to start with this one?
Sure, thank you. So the entire onboarding process now is about helping associates, employees, forge a deeper connection with the company, its people, and more importantly, its values. So if it's a new hire, probably increased induction meetings is change where because you're not meeting people now physically by default over coffee or bumping into them at the printer, you have to have formal meetings in the induction process. The parameter is really how long will it take for the employee to generate value or an associate to generate value when they join a law firm, and hitting that minimum productivity benchmark as per the organizational standards. There are many very good productivity analytical tools which are available, which measure performance, time spent, collaboration time, and HR departments in organization knows where to then help you, where your time is being spent. And after doing all of that, we really need to find a way to stay connected, because typically it is the new hires that get the attention and guidance, and thereafter it stops. So now it's about keeping them connected to the organization, keeping them engaged, well organized. There are concepts called performance check-ins, where you have a conversation with your reporting manager, with your partner, if you're in a law firm, on not transactional related, about where it really has been, what can be better in the next quarter, so that you can work differently to perform better. There's therefore a higher degree of importance being given on interpersonal skills, since we're working remotely. And issues need to be resolved in a solution-oriented manner, where it's simplified and explained and detailed out, because now you're communicating more on email than in person. So the reduced legal language, probably having subheadings so that it's easier when they're reading it, to reduce the time that you have to explain the opinion that you are really giving. There are minor shifts where your email protocol on how many people are really being marked, are they really relevant, because there's so much of influx in the inbox which needs to be managed too. For reward and performance and compensation, and pre-COVID or no COVID, I would say absolutely it's the quality of the work that the person brings to the table. Age, no barriers, position, no barriers. You got to purely reward on performance.
Thank you. Thank you, Parveen. Karen, would you like to add to that, please?
Yes, I mean, I add, and I add briefly, because I don't think there's a great deal I can contribute to this aspect of the conversation, because as a barrister, as an attorney, I am self-employed. So I'm in that happy or unhappy group of people who gets to eat what they kill. You know, if you don't work, you don't eat. So I think in terms of our own performance, we all have a compulsion to work, to seek work, to do work, to be the best that we can be, because you're only as good as your last case. So on a personal level, that's, you know, that's the animals that barristers are, I suppose. But we also have a big support organization. But the way that we manage our support organization is through a management board, and we have a chief executive, and we have a finance team, and we have clerks and marketing and IT, all of those things. So how do we manage their performance? I mean, I think the first thing that we have to realize is, you know, we're not alone in all of these difficulties. When I spoke about uncertainty earlier, and actually looking at the way all of these people have managed this Herculean task of just changing everything, the way in which they work. If they've even managed to do that, that speaks volumes for their capabilities and their commitments to their work. And the other great thing, I think, in this situation is, as far as we are able to, as lawyers, whether we're in firms or like me in a set of chambers, it is working hard to keep our people employed. The best way we can reward them at the moment is to keep them in work. Keep them in work so that they can support their families and have jobs. And if that means changing the jobs that they do, I'm sure that many of them would rather change their jobs, learn new skills, do things differently, just to stay in work. So I think that's my limited contribution on this question. I think that from a chamber's point of view, that's probably as much as we can do.
Thank you, Karen. There's a very thoughtful thought process behind this. You know, a very conscious need to ensure job conservation in whatever way that you can ensure. You know, what is so interesting is that it's such a diverse group. Olivia, would you like to add to this, please? And then maybe Sarah can, you know, add her thoughts as well.
My firm, we basically works like a family. So all the junior lawyers and staff they know who they need to follow, and the mentor, the partner, will work very closely with them, so they know every single piece of work they do, and none of them are actually allowed to send emails out without a partner's approval. So we basically work together as a team all the time, and whether COVID or not, that has been the practice in our firm. So everyone knows each other very well, and that's how we assess. We just from basically every day's work, the quality of work you produce, as Praveen says, is important.
Yeah.
And also another thing is attitude. I think attitude is also a very important thing.
Yeah.
Some people, for example, at 6 o'clock, they will then switch off their WhatsApp. They won't respond anymore. That cannot be why I think they need to move to another firm. So it's I think it's also the willingness to learn and the eagerness to help, to be helpful, whether it is in your job description or not. Because some people, what I notice is, oh, that's not part of my job. I'm not helping. Those kind of people, I think they will need to find a law firm too. And because we treat ourselves as a family, so everyone helps each other, and we think everyone has to put the law firm's interest before their own. So that's the culture we have, and that's how we assess the performance of the people. And obviously, it's not about the billable hours. You can put down, well, we can put down 2 hours to read a letter of 2 pages if you want to, but actually how much the client is willing to pay is more of the issue. So those kind of things, yes, they can indicate, but not, you can't really, it's not a complete image of what it is. So apart from these numbers, we look at the work itself and the attitude. In terms of rewards, yes, obviously money. Money is important to everyone. Pay rise. Oh, we have birthdays leave. So if you have a birthday that day, you can have annual leave that day. So we have got all these little fun things for them, to extra stuff they can have. And we, in terms of rewards as well, we also do funny things together. For example, we did a Christmas video. So all the staff get involved and I don't know whether people likes it, but we had a fun. That's the thing. So everyone had fun. So these are the things that we do to keep everyone alive. I mean, at the moment it's quite a depressing time, so we have to do fun things, and that's kind of a rewarding thing. And we used to have like pizzas gatherings and lunch gatherings and barbecues together, but obviously at the moment we can't. So yeah, this is how we do it. It's more like a friendly firm we do. We don't have a lot of very strict policies going on there. So, and the partners directly work with even paralegals. So there won't be like, because some firms I know that the paralegals work for the junior associates, the junior associates work with this for the senior associates work with partners like that. So the people underneath never actually speak to the partner. It doesn't work that way. We all work in a team together, no matter who you are. So that's how we work.
Great, thank you. Sarah, would you like to have the final word on this, please?
I think that but we were already doing this, starting to do it, switching a little bit the system of performance evaluation from one that was more tailored on quantity to one that is more tailored on quality.
Mm-hmm.
Which means that actually more people than the partners are involved in the evaluations. Because in terms of quality, you may have different teams that have been working on different issues. Then we have practices, but we have also business units dedicated to certain industrial sectors. So we have involved more people in the evaluation process. And I think that COVID has just accelerated something that we had already started because we thought that a simple partner associates system for evaluating performance was not really working for us.
Very, very interesting. Thank you. I think the entire focus for pretty much everybody has been on quality. And I think there is some degree of reinventing the different metrics surrounding performance, compensation, and rewards as well, whether it could be fun things or it could actually be giving people different roles that Karen pointed out in order to ensure that jobs are preserved. So yes, this is very interesting. You know, I had a couple of more questions, but I am also conscious of the time at the same time. I do know that we have a couple of questions from the attendees as well. So I think what I'm going to do is the first question is from Melva. She's asking, have you exercised your right to disconnect from clients when multitasking gets to be overwhelming? Sarah, would you like to respond to that? Anybody can do that, but I'm just, Sarah, since you're on my screen, so I thought.
Yes. Obviously, disconnection is complicated. Whatever you do, it's not only with clients. The fact of, you know, not being physically there pushes me usually to be digitally there all the time. What I have tried to do in order to disconnect is see it the other way around. So dedicate some time to connection, not saying, okay, this time I'm going to disconnect, but the other way around, saying, okay, this time is for connection. So I have other times during the day to do other things, which include also obviously something that is not really connected with my professional life. It's a very difficult exercise. And I have been only half successful with this, because then the call comes and then your associate who is dealing with something instead of you sends you a chat saying, I have a problem, can we just have a quick call? And then you get into something that lasts for 1 hour and a half. But I have been trying to do this. Yes, absolutely.
Great. Personally, I think this is something that I started. I wasn't exercising a right, but I felt a dire need to disconnect. Otherwise, I thought I would either kill someone or shoot myself, given the way we were all, moving down that path. I actually started, I did a test one particular Saturday night. I said, I'm going to shut off my phone and open it on Monday morning. And when I did that, the first time I had 336 WhatsApp messages, okay? Not from clients, not necessarily from clients. I think clients have been very understanding in this whole process. So that was me adding to it. But Parveen, Karen, Olivia, would you like to say something on Melva's question, please?
Sure. So in fact, I just attended a leadership training within the management team. And it was more about Is it a priority that you have called me for that requires that urgent discussion? And I was very clear that I'm there to discuss and resolve issues at any time. And you can reach me even after hours, provided it is urgent.
Correct.
If it is not urgent and you're calling me after hours, then please go to your wife.
Yeah.
It was as basic a conversation as that. And it is available for work, or you're just trying to be available, right, for everybody to talk about anything. And what is the image that you're building around yourself?
Yeah, completely agree with you on that. Karen, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I smiled when Olivia was saying just now, you know, you have to be available. And certainly as a self-employed person, you have to be available. You have to be contactable, always contactable. But there are moments when you simply can't be. But the thing to be is truthful and upfront with people and simply say, between that hour and that hour, you will not be able to reach me. I'll be back straight to you. I will check. And you have to check. So yes, and I agree with what Parveen has just said. Having people ring you on a Saturday afternoon simply to tell you that they are at their desk is not interesting. Yeah. It's not necessary. If they can't manage their work during the week, they have my sympathy, but not on a Saturday afternoon if I'm out walking my dog on the downs, you know? I've done my bit. But if it's urgent, yes, I mean, you know, I've had calls on the way to the ballet, during the ballet, on my way home from the ballet. That is what you do. If you run a firm or if you're self-employed, you have to make yourself available. And the pandemic hasn't really changed that. And if anything, and maybe this is a good point, if there is a blessing, it is that people are infinitely more understanding of your personal challenges when you are confined at home. And they will make allowances for you if you say, do you know what, I'm just putting the tea on the table or something like that. Whereas before you wouldn't have dreamed of saying that to somebody. Now you just say, do you know what, people are out there dying. You can wait 20 minutes while I eat my supper or some such thing as that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that would be me.
Olivia?
I have to say, I have a tendency to please people. So I like Karen said, we need to answer the call at some point, but it also depends on the urgency as well. I mean, if they're talking something really few months later, it's like no urgency, then I'll just text them. I'll say I'll get back to you on Monday or something. But another thing I also do is I delegate to things that I think, for example, even like personal household stuff, I can delegate to my helper as well. And in office, we have associates, etc. So for something I think it is possible to delegate that does not need me to do, I'll delegate. I think this is something a lot of women are not very comfortable with, is delegate to someone else. They kind of want to do everything themselves. But I'm those people who are very okay with delegating to others. But clients, I have to admit, I do put them first. For example, I recall when we did I did IPO before for a very short time. They do work days and not sleeping when they go to printers. So it's a type of work, and also how important this client is to you, to the firm. So yes, it depends. So yeah, but delegation is another thing as well.
So no straight answer, but I think some parity of responses over here. Melva, I hope we've answered your question. I will move on to the next one, which has come from Deep from Vietnam, who says, great to hear from all of you and thank you for sharing. My question, does your country have any help to your business? And what are your expectations of legal business in 2021? Sarah, do you want to take that?
I'm not aware of any subsidy or financial help for law firms in China or in Italy. What I can say is that in Italy we were able to take advantage of certain welfare funds for staff, not for lawyers, because lawyers in Italy are not employees of the firm, but they are professionals, autonomous professionals. In China, I have to say that we had, I think that we had some relief on rent in February, because there were restrictions about how many people and when we could go to the office. And then there was some relief in connection with the welfare of both lawyers and staff for a few months. I think it was February, March, and April. But these were not targeted to law firms. They were available to all the businesses. 2021, maybe cross-border, not extremely strong. Other practices might be like restructuring, litigation, and you know, other types of practices where it's not really physical presence is not really so very important for dealing with the parties.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Does anybody else would you like to add to this? Yes, Karen, please.
Sorry. Yes, I think in the UK we have a wide range of packages available for businesses. I'm not sure that they're always sufficient, but there certainly are a lot in the form of grants and loans to businesses to help them through the pandemic on the basis that there will be a fall off in business. They are not lawyer specific. Also in terms of rates for buildings, taxes for buildings, and occupancy, I think there's been some relief in that sphere as well. In terms of rents, most of that are private negotiations, but most commercial landlords certainly are alive to the fact that if they don't help out with the rent, then they're likely to lose their tenants altogether. So there has been, I think, an unusual level of collaboration on the commercial rental sector with their tenants. And certainly retail people are suffering enormously. And you can imagine if they had to pay their full rent and their full rates, that would kill them alone. So there's been a lot going on in that sphere, but the mantra you hear constantly from businesses, it's not enough, that they are suffering more than they are being assisted. But certainly the British economy has been supported enormously by the government in ways that you couldn't have imagined a year ago, I would say. So, and I think it will continue to do so. I don't think it has any other option. Otherwise, there will just be a massive recession. We're in recession anyway, and I think that's a global issue. But if there was not that level of government support, it would be very, very much more severe.
Thank you.
Can I say something?
Yeah, sure.
The Hong Kong government has actually helped a lot of businesses giving out money, but it's not specific to law firms, but law firms have applied. But then there is a condition: you are not allowed to fire people if you take the money. Now, some law firms, I think they took the grants as a subsidies, so they didn't fire the staff nor reduce the salary. But afterwards, they didn't fire the staff. So that's a tricky part. The landlord is the most difficult ones. They refuse to reduce the rent. So even though the government has helped a lot, it's still not enough to cover all the salaries plus all the rent, everything. In terms of the Law Society of Hong Kong, we are quite lucky that they have actually helped us to about the practice certificate, the fees. So So also the insurance, so we don't have to pay as much as before. That helps a bit. I think in terms of subsidies, yes, we do have help, but unfortunately, I do not know how long the government can keep paying out money. And I think at the end of the day, private businesses still have to stand on their own. You can't rely heavily on the government forever. They do not have enough money themselves. And apparently the inland revenue is now keep chasing people for tax. They for like 2 years, 3 years ago, and parking tickets, they're crazily giving up parking tickets because they do not have enough income for the government. So they're trying other ways to get the income back in order to help all these subsidies. So yes, we do have subsidies.
Thank you. I'm acutely conscious we are, almost 15 minutes past the hour. I just want to very quickly read out a comment that was made by Michael Cartier, which unfortunately I did not see earlier. I think it's a comment, and I think some of this has already been discussed a lot. He says the employees in a firm that likely most affected are the assistants, who are mainly women. A substantial part of their work needs them to be physically present in the office. This can lead to a perception issue. Lawyers can work from home, assistants need to be in the office. Also, the shift to digitalization that is now being accelerated, there will be less work for assistants. So I guess, Michael, this, while this is another set of service providers associated with lawyers who might get impacted because of the change in the methods of working and perhaps less need to be present in the office. If there is anything else that you think you want us to specifically address, but I fully agree with you, and the way we have tried to address these issues is really to give them different roles, which they can also do remotely or bring them into the office from time to time, so that at least they do not lose track and have a sense of continuity in the operations as well. I think, Rhonda, if there is nothing else, sorry.
Finito. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. If there is nothing else, Rhonda, I want to thank everyone. I mean, I think it's very difficult to conclude a discussion like this because the discussion is also constantly evolving because the situation is changing on the ground for everybody. But at least my takeaway after hearing all of you is that we should not treat COVID as a curse, but not also as a blessing, but perhaps as an opportunity to do things a little bit differently than what we have been accustomed to, while maybe, upskilling ourselves, changing the way we work. But I personally, I still remain like Sarah. I'm old fashioned. I like to be in the office, and I need that space where I can sit and focus properly. But I think for a lot of other people who have used this particular opportunity to make sure that they are able to do their work in a committed and in a diligent fashion. So we should just hope that at the end of the day, it's really that COVID, notwithstanding the horrible numbers that I was looking at the beginning of this webinar, I just hope that this pandemic will only cause, will create more opportunities and perhaps different opportunities for the women workforce as well as women in law. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Parveen. Thank you. Karen. Thank you, Olivia. And thank you to all the attendees who have joined us for this session. Thank you for your questions, and hope to see you all soon, virtually at least, in the not too distant future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining the webinar today.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.